We are very delighted to welcome Professor Charlotte Clarke, who is Executive Dean for the Department of Social Sciences and Health here at Durham University. And she is here with us today for an interview to celebrate International Women's Day as part of our Ustinov Meets series. So the theme for International Women's Day 2021 is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future During the COVID Context. And the tagline for this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. We are pleased to welcome Charlotte to speak about her experiences and career to date. And first of all, thank you so much for talking to us today and as part of our activities for International Women's Day, Charlotte. And it just seems like the ideal way to begin would be to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your career to date.
Yes, certainly. I'm delighted to be with you today. That's a real pleasure. So thank you. My career to date. So I'm a nurse professionally. And after working clinically for several years, usually as a nurse, I worked with people at the end of their life and people with dementia. But I started doing postgraduate research at that time as well. So I did my PhD on a part-time basis while I worked clinically. And then as I worked as a nurse educator, and I kind of got merged into universities. Just really stayed with doing research and teaching and wind forward the years. And I've developed a program of research around dementia and also really kind of have worked with some amazing colleagues, some amazing students. Initially at Northumbria University, then at the University of Edinburgh, and then for the last 18 months at Durham University.
Right. And as I've already mentioned, the slogan for this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. And I think I'm also curious to know what that means to you personally and professionally.
Yeah, really, really good question. So I think personally it means being prepared to challenge myself. And as I've got older, if you like, as I've gone on in my career, being a bit more confident about taking on things that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do them or anything. In fact, these days I seem to, every few weeks, every few months, I seem to take on something and I kind of go, I'm not sure I know how to do this, but I'm up for the challenge of learning about it. So that's where the personal challenge is to kind of really step out of my safe space, if you like, and try things that are different. Professionally, within the university, I think for me, the challenge is actually about being very clear about what my values are, what my expectations are, what my standards are, if you like, but then being prepared to call it out if it doesn't match up to that. And that might be my own self, but it might be other people as well. So being part of a real cultural shift within Durham University is something that I'm really proud to be part of, trying to create a change. So that's where I think some of that challenge is. There's also a challenge at Durham that I'm really enjoying. So I have a strategic lead role for health across the university, and actually being able to take that as an issue, as an agenda, and actually find ways of championing health across the university is very exciting. Writing the strategy for that, seeing that implemented, connecting it in with the Respect Commission, connecting it in with the health and well-being strategy. This is a great challenge and a very privileged thing to be able to do.
Right. Thank you so much, Charlotte. And I suppose I want to ask you further about what's the best piece of advice you have ever received, and also what is that one piece of advice that you would give to people who are just starting, specifically women who are just starting their career in academia, just like me?
So the one piece of advice, do you know, I've met so many people in my career who have really inspired me. But I think one person I met early on in my career, I just started my postdoctoral work actually, I found and the message she gave me was that it's okay to not know things. And that was so liberating. It was like this amazing freedom. Suddenly I didn't have to know things or claim I know things and then be terribly stressed about not knowing them. So the fact that she walked around as a senior professor going, well, that's really interesting, but I don't know. Let's go and find out. Really, really, I found very liberating. And at the same time, I worked with somebody who wrote about the importance of mess. And she wrote about the importance of mess if we're to ever learn anything, doing it research or learning. Because if we think we know stuff, then we're not open to learning about it, is the basic message. So it's okay to feel in a mess, and it's okay to not know things. And actually, I try to be very explicit now about not knowing things and communicating on that permission almost to not know, but to be curious and want to go and discover. So that was one of the really key things that I learned.
Oh, that's actually brilliant to hear, to always remain curious and be explicit when you don't know things really.
Yeah.
And the importance of mess, that is something I really did not imagine earlier. But I think coming on to your academic interests, I've seen that you've produced a lot of influential work to address health inequalities and stigma, specifically in relation to dementia. And I wondered, like, what you consider to be your greatest achievement in this very important field, and why?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I've done what I've done. There is so much more to be done. I hesitate to claim any particular expertise around this, but I've done what I can do and continue to do what I can do. I continue to be research active. I think probably what's proved to be particularly helpful that's come out of some of the work is what I've called silent harms, and the ability to describe silent harms, particularly when it's come to older people with dementia, but actually it relates across the piece, although we might call it other things these days. And I had a wonderful conversation recently with someone in the student union, which really helped me think I need to go away and think about the relationship between what I call silent harms and what we call microaggressions in other contexts. So when I'm talking about silent harms, what I mean are the kind of social and psychological detriment that is imposed on somebody with dementia because of their diagnosis, the assumption that they are unable to understand, that they're unable to make decisions, that they've lost competence and capability. Those kind of messages are enormously destructive to somebody's sense of their own well-being and their own ability. And so people often, that fuels a cycle of exclusion, of self-exclusion, of isolation. It fuels stigma. And that's been really helpful. And I called it silent harms because I wanted to differentiate it from, if you like, noisy harms. If somebody falls over and breaks a leg, we notice it. We, as a healthcare professional or something like that, we notice those kind of harms. But those quieter harms go unnoticed other than by the individual. And that's why I'm wondering now whether there's a relationship with the microaggressions and how that gets assimilated and how destructive that is. So I think, though, that notion of silent harms has been something that's been been quite useful and a concept that people have been able to work with and understand. I think that's also led me beyond dementia to looking at inequalities more widely, to talk a lot about, I tend to use the expression silenced voices. So voices, people's voices that are perhaps silenced by society, that there's maybe structural oppression of some people's voices, but then also silent voices, because those people themselves perhaps don't feel that they have something to say, don't feel that they have a powerful voice. They do, of course, but all of those social and psychological dynamics have led to them having a silenced voice. And that I take into all of my work, actually.
Right, and that was very interesting to hear. It was very engaging to hear that perspective as well. And I think my next question is around how Durham has 4 executive deans, and this is the first time that these 4 senior leadership positions have actually been held by women simultaneously. So as executive dean for social sciences and health, what do you consider to be the key opportunities to allow greater representation of female colleagues in senior roles? And also, if you could also talk a little bit about some of the challenges that remain in achieving this aim, perhaps?
No, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. So I think some of the strengths, and maybe that's just my approach to things. Maybe it's, follows on from the approach I was just describing. In any case, but I think it's an executive dean role is about working with people. It's very person-facing. It's working with all of the staff in the faculty. It's working with all of the students in the faculty. So for me, it's a role that has people right at the heart of it, and working with people and working with a culture, with an environment that you're trying to shape to enable people to give of their best. So, maybe there are some qualities needed in that, or some ways of doing that I come to doing that. And that's how I understand the role as a woman. What are some of the challenges in that? I guess, and this isn't wholly a gender aspect, but not everybody will work that way, and not everybody will understand that way of working. So there will be some people who are far more data-driven in the way they work, for example, and the way they lead and manage. And I am, but actually I would put people first kind of thing. So I think, as you go on in leadership roles, you become more adept, you become more flexible in the way that you use different strategies to handle different situations. So if my primary focus is a very people-focused approach, then sometimes I have to adapt that strategy so that I'm communicating effectively with other people as well.
Right. And Charlotte, I want to also go on to further ask you around a question around how you've held several posts throughout your career and are now the executive dean here at Durham. How do you feel your prior roles have prepared you for your current role? And is there anything about your current role that you think has surprised you?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I think, every role has prepared me. Even when I was a nurse in the NHS, that role has prepared me for the way I work now. So all these experiences accumulate. Sometimes it maybe seems hard having a challenging or a difficult conversation, but actually I was in my 20s when I was sitting down talking with people about maybe they, we knew the end of their life was not far away, or their parents had just died or something like that. And, so having difficult conversations is threaded throughout the work I do. I think what the different experiences have allowed me to do is to meet lots of different people and experience different ways of working. And I learn from that. The person who was my line manager at Edinburgh, for example, had a coaching approach. So I would work with her, and she would take a very coaching style and encourage me to think things through. She wouldn't necessarily tell me what to do or give me the answers to things, but she would really help me think through what my options were and how I might approach different situations. So, almost help to know that there's that way of working. But different people work in different ways. I mentioned a colleague earlier who almost like gave permission to not know things. So for me, all these different roles, you accumulate experience of dealing with different situations, but every situation is a different context and has its own unique aspects. But for me, the main thing is that I've just had the privilege of working with different people and learning from them and learning about different ways of working and different ways of being in the world, working with people from all around the world, be the students, be they other members of staff, and actually being open, needing to be open to realizing that my way of understanding the world isn't the same as other people's necessarily. And that's why listening is so important. I don't make assumptions about how other people might experience the world.
Right. That was very invigorating to hear, Charlotte. And I think finally I want to ask you that if you could go back to when you were 21 years of age, what piece of advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know now and the experience that you have attained now?
Oh, do you know that's one of the hardest questions? So when I was 21, I was in my first year at university. So I went to university just a little bit later than perhaps many people do. And I was doing a degree in nursing studies. When I turned 21, I was on my first placement, which was a care of the elderly ward. Very interesting experience, but of course it fueled my love of working with older people. And I did my first degree in Glasgow. And my placement was in a small hospital in Drumchapel. You may well not know it, but Drumchapel's not one of the most affluent parts of Glasgow. It isn't. It certainly wasn't then anyway. But I pulled out a photograph. I want to show you this photograph as well. I don't know whether you can see that. So when I was 21, this is my daughter. She's 3 years old. And this is where I was living when I was 21 as a first year undergraduate student. And I lived in this caravan. My daughter's standing next to the caravan there for a year, for the whole of my first year at university. And I just wanted to share that with you because sometimes I kind of look around the room where I am now and things like that, and I'm not quite sure how I've made that journey. But I just want to say, in answer to your question about what advice would I give, I think there's two things that need to be done together. And one is keep your head up and your eyes focused forward. Know where you're going and keep walking towards that goal. And the other is to know where your feet are. And even when things seem like pretty rough, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep your eyes sighted forward, and you'll be okay.
Well, Charlotte, that was such a wholesome response. And the picture that you showed me, that just sums up how the transition and how transcendental your journey has been. So yeah, thank you so much for talking with me today here and being part of our series, and giving such engaging and interesting responses to our questions. It has been such a privilege and an honor to speak with you. Lovely. Thanks, Charlotte.
No, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.